Okay, so we've looked at evolution, the way of generating diversity of types of organisms. Now we'll start to look at the structures of major groups of organisms. We'll start with the plants and then move on to the major structures in animals, getting closer to what we see in ourselves. Again, don't forget the questions relating to the videos. Make sure you're looking at the PowerPoints, putting that together, also letting me know if you have any problems with things and any stray assignments get turned in. Okay, plants. Three main parts of vascular plants: the roots, the stems, and the leaves. Some of these have more tough and typically large structures, wood, and so you have these secondary tissues that have the compound lignin in them that makes them harder, more durable. And then we have the herbaceous plants, things like grasses and a lot of small weeds and things like that, that do not have wood in them. A few different styles of growth. We have annual plants, ones that will grow, produce their spores or seeds, and die all within 1 year. Biennials are plants that spend their first year growing, building up a good supply of nutrients, and then they use that energy in the second year to produce their spores or seeds, and then die after that. And then we have the perennials, plants that live a relatively long time. Most perennials will have multiple cycles of reproduction through their lifespan, although not all. Perennial plants, and for that matter biennial, may also die back and be dormant for a while. This is familiar, happening to a lot of plants in our area during wintertime, for example. Another pattern, depending on local conditions, some plants will lose their leaves for winter, being deciduous, like a number of our trees, but we also have evergreen plants as well. Major parts of our plant: we have the root system, typically down into the ground, although sometimes sticking out some, and then the stem part of the plant, which again typically above ground, but you can have underground parts of stems as well. And the stem is in turn part of the shoot system, so stems plus leaves together, and if it's a flowering plant, flowers, fruits, those are also part of our shoot system. Back at the beginning of class, we mentioned the levels of organization in living things. We started out looking at atoms and molecules. In turn, those are used to build more complex structures such as organelles. And organelles, together with additional molecules not attached into something, make up the individual cells. Some living things, that's all they've got. But plants are multicellular, so we have multiple cells all together in one organism. And these cells are associated into groups of cells working together. Tissues. Yep, the PowerPoint decided to move on here. And then tissues can be grouped into more complex organs, multiple tissues. So in our plants, we have three main types of tissue that we'll look at, and familiar parts such as a leaf or a flower or a stem or root. Those are organs with typically all three of these types of tissues represented. So the dermal tissue system is the outside cover of the plant. Of course, we have a similar system ourselves, our skin. Vascular tissue system are, of course, in vascular plants, These are the water conducting tissues of the plant. And of course, along with water, anything that's dissolved in it is carried around as well, whether it's food that was produced from the leaves or minerals taken up from the ground by the roots. These will travel with the water through our vascular tissue system. And then we've got everything else that's the ground tissue system. It's kind of a catch-all for things that aren't vascular and aren't dermal. So here are examples. Leaves, roots, stems, all these will characteristically have vascular tissues, typically towards the inside, so as to reduce the risk that they're damaged by anything that happens to the plant. And outside of our dermal tissue system, shown in the brown here. And then the kind of light brownish color here is the ground tissue, the rest of the material in the plant. Plants have a distinctive ability that any one living cell of a plant can potentially grow into a new plant. That's something that for animals is associated just with stem cells. And for that matter, certain types of stem cells to grow a whole new individual. But plants in general have this ability. Now, yes, some sponges can too, but any more complex animal doesn't have quite that potential for regeneration. Now, living cells, yes, not surprising, dead cells do not grow into new plants. But dead cells are very important. The water transporting cells, a lot of those are actually dead cells just sitting there as an empty tube, and water moves through them. A lot of the structure of wood is made of dead cells supporting the plant. So dead cells are quite important to the plant, just as, say, our hair or fingernails are not alive, but they're still functioning for us as well. Different styles of plant cells have different chemistry in the cell walls. Characteristic materials in cell walls include cellulose and hemicellulose. Again, these are polymers, lots and lots of individual, in this case, sugar molecules attached together. So they are polysaccharides, similar to starch, but a bit different in structure, and form a more stiff and sturdy outside to the cell. Pectin, you may recall, is a sticky polysaccharide that is in between plant cells, holding them together. It's also in jams and jellies. We extract pectin from some particular fruits and other plant parts that have a lot of them, and use them to make preserves, making that sticky jelly-like consistency. Lignin includes more protein versus the sugars of the polysaccharides, and it's very stiff and strong, a key part of wood. Okay, tissues, look more at our vascular tissue to start with. Again, as we saw in the picture a bit ago, vascular tissue will be surrounded by ground tissue, and then of course the whole plant has the dermal tissue on the outside. Plants need water, minerals, things from the roots to come up, and it needs the food produced by photosynthesis in the leaves to go down. So we need up and down tissues, and these are known as the xylem and phloem. Both of these form a set of tubes that go all the way from the roots to the top of the plant. Xylem is what is carrying the things from the roots up through the rest of the plant. often it's fairly sturdy, helps support the plant as well. Phloem, bringing the food produced in the leaves down through the rest of the plant. And again, these are typically sturdy structures, help support the plant as well. We see particular developments of these in flowering plants. Again, vascular plants having xylem and phloem, allowing them to move water around through them, allows them to get much bigger and to be somewhat more independent of water than was true for the non-vascular plants. Instead of just tiny moss, you can have something like a fern that can actually get to be tree-sized. The flowering plants have yet more specializations in the structure of their xylem and phloem. They're very good at conducting the fluids around within them that they need. Dermal system. This is the outside. You can kind of think of this as the plant's skin. And we have a couple of varieties. Epidermis is the typical thin, usually just a single layer of cell that covers the outside of soft herbaceous plants. Periderm is a somewhat thicker, more tough layer that is found in bark of wood plants. So epidermis, it's covering the surface, protecting the insides. It's going to be cells well attached together, just like our skin cells. Relatively flat. Well, yeah, that's what you want for covering a surface. Typically not too specialized. They're largely there just to be a cover. But you do have some special features. There are some cells that are able to move a bit to basically open and close. And so these cells are known as guard cells on either side of the stomata, the pores, that the cells can either open or close. Many epidermal cells also have hair-like structures on them called trichomes, and these have a variety of functions. Up on land, you're at risk of drying out. And so plants that live up on land characteristically have a waxy outer layer called a cuticle that helps keep them from losing as much water. Okay, but to photosynthesize, they need to get in carbon dioxide, and so they have to have the ability to open the stomata to get that in, close them when they're not needing as much carbon dioxide to keep from drying out. Of course, opening the stomata also lets them release the extra oxygen that they don't need. Another important thing for opening the pores, letting things through, how does the plant get water and minerals up from its roots? There's no beating heart the way we have to get fluids around through us. Instead, the plant relies on evaporation out the top. And so as you have water evaporating out of the tips of the leaves and stems, water behind that moves up to take its place. Water molecules attract each other due to their polarity. So you get water tending to move up through the plant, kind of like the way water will move up into a towel put on a bit of spilled water. And so water moving up and out at the top is what pulls more water and the minerals and whatever else that's dissolved in it up from the roots to the plant. Okay, but hairs. What are hairs useful for a plant? Lots of things. Some of them allow the plant to do specialized secretion. For example, there are plants living in salty areas that are able to put out extra salt through the trichomes and thus survive despite the salt that would kill other plants. Others can produce other chemicals on the surface. For example, these sundews are plants that capture insects. They make sweet, sticky stuff on little hairs on the leaves, and an insect can be attracted to that and get stuck, and then the leaf folds up around it and digests the insect. A coating of hair, especially light-colored hair, will help reflect light so that the surface of the plant doesn't get as hot. So that is a common feature of a number of plants growing in hot, dry areas such as deserts. Defenses. Stinging nettle. If you've ever run into it, you don't want to repeat the experience. The trichomes, these hairs on the plant surface, contain chemicals that irritate, give a stinging sensation when you touch it. Some of these hairs are pointed and sturdy enough that they can actually poke a hole in an insect and keep that insect from eating the plant. Hairs sticking up also provide a surface where frost or dew may accumulate. On the one hand, getting dew can be a valuable source of water for plants that live in drier environments. For example, you may notice if you read in the Bible mentions of the early and late rains, what that's talking about is that in the area of Israel, typically you've got some rain happening in the springtime, and then no rain at all until the fall. Obviously, people are very dependent on having that rain occur at the right time, certainly before modern technology, but it's important even today. How can plants manage that dry summer? Well, it does get cool enough at night to have some dew. And so if a plant has surfaces that allow it to get more dew, it will have more water and be able to grow. And there are other parts of the world that's important as well. Frost, getting too cold may be a problem, but if you can keep the ice up on your hair and not down on the main plant, that provides a little protection. So there are some advantages there as well. Underground, roots characteristically have lots of hairs on them, called root hairs. Some of these names actually do make sense. And this makes for a lot more surface area, helps the plant to absorb the water, the minerals, other nutrients from the soil, helps with interaction with those symbiotic fungi, things like that. And the plant can take up the things that it needs, and then into the xylem they go and travel through the rest of the plant. So pictures, this oval thing, the two parts to either side, kind of banana shaped, are the guard cells around the stoma. That's one of them, stomata is plural. So here's that opening. The guard cells are allowing gases in and out at the moment, but they can swell up and close that off. And then around here we have the various relatively flat epidermal cells. How do plants grow? It's quite familiar that they do grow, especially to any of you who have to mow lawns or something like that. But turns out the pattern of growth in plants is rather distinctive. Plants grow in particular places. They don't just grow everywhere. And these areas where growth happens and cell division are known as meristems. So mitosis is happening. We're dividing, making new cells in these meristems. And so the cells in that area remain as stem cells, keep on dividing, and then after they divide, some of those cells they've produced grow into particular types of cells and stop dividing while the meristem cells keep on with their growth. Most plants, the roots going down, the stems going up, are growing throughout the lifespan of the plant. Leaves, flowers, those typically have a size and they'll stop growing. There are two styles of growth in plants. Primary growth is when the ends of the roots and the stems continue to grow and get longer. This is found in all plants. The soft herbaceous plants only have primary growth. The ends grow. Plants with true wood also have secondary growth. They can grow bigger around as well as getting longer on the ends. So, buds, which says apical meristem, an area of that dividing tissue or having mitosis in the tips of the roots and the shoots. Secondary growth found in gymnosperms, say pines, cycad, ginkgo, and also in the dicots that have wood, many types of trees, shrubs, things like that. These are able to grow bigger around over time as well. The monocots do not have this. So even though some monocots, such as many palms, get to be tree-sized, they do not have the growing bigger around the way pine trees or oak trees or things like that have. The wood and the bark are produced by the secondary growth. As it grows bigger around, what's left behind in the middle, mostly old xylem, gets pretty much filled in and it's just sitting there as support for the plant. It's not doing much else for functioning. That's part of why a tree can be perfectly fine with a hollow inside. It's just old xylem that's rotted away anyway. Okay, how does this work in roots? Primary growth, there's a hard root cap providing some protection. And then right behind that is the apical meristem, the area where cells are dividing by mitosis. We're making new cells. Once we've made those cells, the cells that don't continue on as stem cells will grow in size to their final size and shape. So we get the cells getting longer. They also start to grow the root hairs, things like that, get to their final form. Similarly, at the top end of our plant, we'll have a shoot, apical meristem, and we'll have buds starting on leaves, things like that, growing off from that. So keep dividing new cells, and older cells getting longer, and the plant gets taller. Again, some of these cells are the ones that will keep on growing. Other cells, once they've divided, they'll start to grow into their final size and shape, but they do not continue dividing. Okay, but what about secondary growth? Secondary growth occurs associated with the bark. We have the inner bark, which has the secondary phloem, where nutrients are coming down from the leaf and to the rest of the plant. And then we have the outer bark, mostly dead cells, and it's periderm or dermal tissue out there, just providing protection. Grow. Plants need meristem, an area of dividing cells. And so secondary growth means there's secondary meristems, not just on the ends, the way all plants have, but the plants with secondary growth also have basically a ring in stems or roots known as cambium, which is where we have continued cell division extending out sideways, making our root or stem bigger around, in addition to the initial getting longer. So this includes part that is growing, making our xylem and phloem. Characteristically, the xylem is towards the inside, phloem towards the outside, and so you'll have kind of a ring shape where xylem is building, growing towards the inside, and phloem towards the outside. And then we also have an outer layer that's growing the periderm, our dermal tissue. Towards the inside, we have the live part, mostly functions in just storing nutrients, things like that. And then to the outside, we have the bark outer layer, the dead part. So, diagram version, we've had our shoot grow initially from the primary meristem, getting longer. Now we start to get bigger around secondary growth. So the middle part, here's our fasciocambium, the loop where we're going to have new xylem dividing, growing in from there, new phloem growing out from there, and then our thin epidermal layer. This keeps on growing. We build up our outer and inner bark and the wood of the xylem towards the interior. So over time, as this gets big, we'll have quite a large zone of xylem built up as the central wood. Then the phloem and the inner bark, periderm of outer bark. Plants grow at varying rates depending on conditions. Is there plenty of rain? Is it too dry? Is it too hot? Is it too cold? Is it just right? Of course, if it's just right, the plant will grow well. If it's not so great, the plant will grow relatively little or maybe not at all. If our plant is building up wood, then we'll see this in how much it grows over time. Places such as here that have a reasonably regular sequence of seasons will have a relatively regular pattern of growing faster or slower, and this produces the rings that we see in many trees. Now, of course, if you're someplace where it's basically the same year-round, you may not see any rings, or they may follow a different pattern, say wet season versus dry season.